Startling truths about the Founding Fathers hidden from history. We all grew up hearing tales of George Washington's cherry tree and Benjamin Franklin's kite experiment, but the reality of the Founding Fathers is far darker and more complex than the sanitized stories we learned in school. While they played pivotal roles in creating the United States, their lives were filled with shocking and often horrifying details that history books tend to gloss over. Fact number 1. Patrick Henry kept his mentally ill wife confined in isolation. Patrick Henry, known for his iconic cry of "Give me liberty" or "Give me death," led a life that also contained a dark and tragic chapter involving his wife, Sarah. Their marriage was initially happy, but Sarah developed what is believed to be postpartum depression after the birth of their sixth child. Her condition rapidly worsened, leading her to unpredictable and violent behavior, including an attempt to drown one of her children. In the 18th century, mental illness was poorly understood and often associated with evil. Treatments were brutal, often involving imprisonment or worse. To protect Sarah from the harsh treatment of the time and possibly to shield his own reputation, Henry confined her in their basement, where she remained under constant supervision, restrained in a makeshift straitjacket. Sarah lived in these conditions for 4 years before her death, which is suspected to have been by suicide. Number 2. Human bones discovered in Benjamin Franklin's London home. The phrase "skeletons in the closet" has a literal application when it comes to Benjamin Franklin. In 1998, renovators in Franklin's London residence uncovered 1,200 pieces of human bones buried beneath the floor. The bones belonged to at least 15 people, 6 of whom were children. At first glance, this might suggest Franklin had sinister inclinations, but experts believe the bones are linked to an underground anatomy school that operated with Franklin's assistance. During that time, studying human anatomy was seen as immoral, and acquiring cadavers often required sneaking them from graveyards or gallows. It is believed that Franklin, who was an avid scientist, allowed these activities to take place in his home. Number 3. A New York senator's unusual demise. Gouverneur Morris, a prominent figure who helped draft the preamble of the U.S. Constitution, met an unusual and tragic end. Known for his peg leg, which rumor suggests he acquired while fleeing an angry husband after an affair, Morris lived an eventful life. His death in 1816 at age 64 was the result of a bizarre attempt to relieve a urinary tract blockage. In desperation, Morris reportedly tried to clear the blockage himself with a piece of whale bone, an effort that led to a fatal infection. Number 4. George Washington exploited legal loopholes to keep people enslaved. George Washington, who inherited his first enslaved individuals at the age of 10, used legal loopholes to ensure they remained enslaved, even as abolitionist sentiments grew in the North. While residing in Philadelphia, Washington manipulated the Gradual Abolition Act of 1780, which mandated that any enslaved person residing in Pennsylvania for more than 6 months would be free. To avoid this, Washington would secretly send his enslaved people across state lines every 6 months, resetting the clock and preventing their legal emancipation. Number 5. Colonial America's alcohol consumption. Today, the average American consumes about 2 gallons of alcohol per year, but during colonial times, the figure was closer to 7 gallons. The typical colonist began drinking beer or cider by midday, well before lunch. Several theories attempt to explain this excessive drinking, including the scarcity of clean water, a widespread belief that water was unhealthy, and the idea that only the poor drank water. Alcoholic beverages like beer and cider were not even considered alcohol in the same way we think of them today, and with the pressures of establishing a new country, there was little incentive to curb drinking habits. Number 6. The truth about George Washington's teeth. George Washington is one of the most iconic figures in American history, but his dental struggles are less widely known. As he aged, his dental problems grew severe enough to alter the shape of his face. Although many believe Washington's dentures were made of wood, they were actually constructed from a mix of materials including lead, brass, gold, ivory, and even human teeth, some of which were purchased from enslaved people. An entry in Washington's account book reveals he bought 9 teeth from black Americans for 122 shillings, highlighting the darker side of this founding father's history. Number 7. The oldest founding father's harrowing ordeal. John Hart, the oldest signer of the Declaration of Independence at 65, endured significant hardships for his patriotism. In 1776, just months after signing the Declaration, Hart's wife died, and British forces drove him and his 13 children from their New Jersey home. While he sent his youngest children to live with neighbors, Hart himself hid from the British in caves, open fields, and forests during the harsh New Jersey winter. During his absence, the British looted his property, killed his livestock, and partially destroyed his home. Number 8. John Adams, the president who wanted a new monarchy. John Adams, America's second president, struggled to step out of George Washington's shadow. Unlike the charismatic Washington, Adams was less popular and had political ideas that alienated many. As vice president, Adams suggested that the president should be addressed as His Highness, the President of the United States of America, and protector of the rights of the same. This monarchical-sounding title was poorly received in a country that had just fought a revolution to escape such titles. Adams' presidency was also marked by the unpopular Alien and Sedition Acts, which criminalized government criticism, contributing to his failure to win a second term. Number 9. A founding father poisoned by his grandnephew. Judge George Wythe, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, died under tragic circumstances, poisoned by his own grandnephew after threatening to disinherit him. After consuming poisoned coffee, Wythe, his 16-year-old protege Michael Brown, and a woman Wythe had enslaved all fell violently ill. Wythe succumbed to the poisoning within days. Despite testimony from the enslaved woman, Lydia Broadnax, who saw the grandnephew tamper with the coffee, Virginia law at the time barred black people from testifying against white defendants, leading to his acquittal. Number 10. Thomas Jefferson's exploitation of enslaved people. The relationship between Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings is often romanticized, but it was a deeply troubling and abusive situation. After his wife died, Jefferson began a relationship with Hemings, his wife's half-sister and an enslaved woman owned by Jefferson. This relationship began when Hemings was just a teenager, and Jefferson was in his 40s. They had 6 children together, all of whom Jefferson raised as slaves. Despite the inherent exploitation, their relationship has been depicted in romantic terms over the years, including in operas and novels, much to the dismay of many who recognize the power imbalance and abuse at play. Number 11. George Washington's use of harsh punishments on enslaved people. There is ongoing debate about whether George Washington was a cruel or relatively kind slave owner, but many historical records suggest he was not averse to using harsh punishments on those he enslaved. While corporal punishment was common across the South, Washington is recorded as having employed especially severe methods, further complicating his legacy as one of America's most revered figures. Number 12. Thomas Paine's stolen remains scattered around the world. Thomas Paine, celebrated for his influential pamphlet Common Sense, died in 1809, but his legacy took a strange turn after his death. Paine, who fell out of favor for his outspoken views against organized religion, had a modest funeral attended by fewer than 10 people. He was buried on his farm, with his burial wishes largely ignored. 10 years later, William Cobbett, a political admirer, exhumed Paine's remains with the intent of giving him a more dignified burial in London. However, Cobbett's plan went awry. Paine's remains were never reburied. Instead, they were passed down through Cobbett's family, who eventually sold them off in pieces. Today, the whereabouts of Paine's remains are unknown, with some claiming his head is in Australia while other parts are scattered across the globe, making a proper burial an impossible task.